Where PSG are right now, it kind of reminds me of where Manchester City were when they beat Real Madrid over 2 legs and eventually won the Champions League 2 seasons ago, where they just needed to get over that hurdle. They needed to play that big game against Real Madrid. They are the gatekeepers of this competition. They've won it 15 times.
We're going to focus on the 3 of those sides who can still win a treble this season, starting with Barca. Chris, do you think they're the most likely of the 3 teams to do it, given the way they're playing, particularly recently?
I would say it's about level between them and Paris Saint-Germain, just because I think they're probably the 2 teams with a draw in the quarterfinal of the Champions League that I would most favor them. I think it's probably Barcelona ahead of Dortmund first in terms of favorites, probably PSG second, and then Real Madrid third to get it through ahead of Arsenal. But Barcelona, the way that they're going, they just deliver such a consistent level of performance. They've yet to lose in 2025. I think it's 18 wins and 4 draws this calendar year. They've scored 141 goals this season, which is an absurd figure. And I really do believe that this Barcelona team can just deliver game in and game out. It's about health of their key players, particularly Pedri in midfield, particularly Yamal down the wings, and also their capacity to deliver this level of performance in crunch games. They have an El Clasico to play in a Copa del Rey final, an El Clasico to play to win La Liga. They will have a very difficult Champions League game somewhere along the way. And I just believe that this Barcelona team can get a large part of that job done. I don't know if they can get all of it done. I think it's going to be really difficult for any of these teams that we're talking about to get it done. But for Barcelona, I think they have every chance of doing it because of how good they've been.
Given these fixtures coming up as well, can you see them potentially winning all 3 of those competitions they've got to come?
I can. For me, you look at the fixtures that they have left, I think they will be favorites in the tie against Borussia Dortmund. I think they'll be favorites in the tie against whoever wins between Bayern and Inter. And I think it's, for me, the thing that holds me back from saying it is the number of games they'll have against Real Madrid. 2, potentially 3. Because in a Copa del Rey, in a second La Liga meeting, you mean to tell me they're going to play 4 times and Barcelona are going to win them all? I guess if they draw the meeting in La Liga, they have that
Madrid
cushion.
Are specialists at these, backs against the wall kind of games, aren't they?
Particularly in 2-legged ties, as we saw in the Copa del Rey and as we've seen again and again and again in the Champions League. But I do think that Barcelona, they had a formula that worked against Real Madrid. They've won by an aggregate score of 9-2, but I just can't see it happening 4 times in one season. I just cannot see it. So I think for me, the biggest one that has a little bit of margin for error is La Liga. It would have been even bigger if they could beat Betis at the weekend, but Betis, we know, are a very strong team. The question will be, as always, how do you balance competitions? I think we're seeing Inter struggle with it. We'll talk about them later on, but I think that balance is very difficult. They've gotten it right so far, but these are the most important games. The games you have to give absolutely everything. I think a thing they could do to go a long way is to take care of Borussia Dortmund quickly. If they could play them at home, win 3 or 4-1, 3 or 4-0 in that first leg, and you have a second leg to play, that'll be a little bit easier. I think that could go a long way in helping them out.
Let's move it on to Real Madrid. What element of their struggles recently has got you most worried?
Defensive without question. You look at this last week of games that they played. They played home against Valencia, and they gave up 2 goals. They played home against Leganés, and they gave up 2 goals. Those are bottom half of the table sides. One is in the relegation zone in La Liga, and they gave up 4 goals in Copa del Rey to Real Sociedad. Carlo Ancelotti himself acknowledged the lack of balance that they have in this team. But they're still in it. They're 4 points off of Barcelona at the top of La Liga. In the Champions League, you simply cannot favor any other club against Real Madrid, no matter the opposition. They'll play Arsenal in this round. I think they'll get through with probably a minimum of fuss. Maybe they'll lose this first leg, but I think in the second leg, I just can't see Arsenal going to the Bernabeu and beating them. I cannot see it. So I think they will get through in Champions League. The question is now, can they be consistent enough in La Liga to basically win all of their remaining games and beat Barcelona in a Clásico, and then do it again in the Copa del Rey as well. Here you see the fixtures on April the 26th will be that May meeting is when they play in La Liga. But with so many games, with, for me, a lack of depth, they're not a team that has a lot of strong depth. There it is on May the 11th, and then you have a potential Champions League semifinal. Difficult games to play in La Liga as well. I don't see that level of consistency from this side to talk about a treble. I think they can win the Champions League. I think they can win Copa del Rey. I think catching La Liga will probably be a difficult challenge. I don't see them having treble potential because they're not consistent enough and they give up too many goals.
Let's kick it over to Italy and speak about Inter Milan. I feel like we've said all season that this Inter Milan side are going to eventually hit top gear. but they haven't quite got there yet.
Yeah.
Why not?
I think the main reason for me is injuries and to go with that age. They're an old team. Their average age is roughly 30 years old of the players that play. You rely on a player like Francesco Acerbi in the heart of your back 3 years, 37. Brilliant performer on his day. But you're starting to see when all of a sudden, I think they've played 47 games now. You think about the run that they have left with 7 games left in La Liga, potentially 2 games left in Coppa Italia, potentially 5 games left in the Champions League. You're talking about 55, 60 games left for them to play, or for them to play this season. And I think you look at the game against Parma that they played at the weekend. They are trying to get their best players off the field. Bastoni comes off with injury. Çalhanoğlu and Di Marco and Lautaro Martinez all come off because they're on minutes restrictions, considering they're returning from injury. Those are your 4 best guys. Denzel Dumfries is out with injury as well. They're trying to grind out results by getting 60 to 65 minutes out of their best players, when this is the time of year when you need 90 minutes from your best players. They just aren't getting 90 minutes right now from those guys. I think if they were all fit and they were all firing, we've seen in the first halves that they've played in Serie A recently, they can still, I think, deliver a top-level performance for 45 minutes. I don't think they can do it for 90. I think that's why they're still vulnerable in Serie A. We talked earlier about the fixture list that Napoli have to go and catch up because they're playing a fairly easy schedule for the remainder of the season. And I think in the Champions League, a difficult fixture against Bayern, who themselves have injury problems. And then, of course, the Coppa Italia second leg, I think they'll get through at Milan, but then they'll could potentially have a very difficult game against Bologna in the final. So I think it's a real challenge for them to grind out the remaining games, get to 55, 60 games played over the course of a season, and still deliver top-level performance.
For me, arguably, PSG are the most interesting side in this group, given from what we've seen from them in past seasons. You're saying they're potentially the most likely to go on and win the treble. Do you have that caveat, that worry about the fact that they haven't been able to deliver in the Champions League? Or do you feel that this is such a different side from what we've seen from PSG in the last 4 or 5 seasons that we can almost forget what's gone before?
I think it's easy to forget what happened in the Liverpool tie, which was they were dominant. And we sang hosannas about how good they were in terms of performance. But in terms of actual delivering of goals, they had to go to penalties because they couldn't convert chances. That is my fear going into a Champions League tie against Real Madrid. Because how many times do Real Madrid punish you for letting them off the hook? You have to be clinical. You have to destroy them in games. You have to win by 3 or 4 clear goals so that the prospect of a comeback is not on. I think they get through ahead of Villa. I think they're a much better team than Aston Villa. The question is, if they play Real Madrid in the semifinal, do they have it mentally to put away the big chances that they'll get in a 2-legged tie against Real Madrid? I think they're a better team, a much better team than Real Madrid in terms of performance that they deliver game in and game out. And also, they've been a bit vulnerable in Coupe de France as well. For as much as the fact that they're playing Reims in the final, they've had some difficult games along the way. They just struggled with Dunkirk. They were 2-0 down in that semifinal in the Coupe de France. So obviously, they've already won the league. No problem there. But for me, it's about Champions League, putting away chances. I think they're the best team in the competition. And if you were to make me pick, I think they're the team most likely to win the treble out of the 4 that we just talked about.
How interesting will that potential game with Real Madrid be, given that Mbappe is going to be on the other side, playing against their former star? Will that play into psychology? It might inspire them, might have the opposite effect for these PSG players.
I think it really proved to be a decisive moment in the history of Paris Saint-Germain. When you look at, obviously, it was the stars era. It wasn't just Mbappe, it was Neymar and Messi that dominated the headlines at PSG, and they were trying to win it by bringing in and attracting these top-level players. But now they're a team-oriented, about their pressing, about their possession, and the incisiveness with which they play, and it's an evenly distributed attack with Ousmane Dembele now profiting the most off of that attack. And so I think it would be a real signal if they go against this star-laden Real Madrid team that kind of suffer from the same problems that PSG had for so many years, an imbalance of star players that are unable to play together with chemistry and with flow and defend well enough that you send that message. It kind of reminds me where PSG are right now. It kind of reminds me of where Manchester City were when they beat Real Madrid over 2 legs and eventually won the Champions League 2 seasons ago, where they just needed to get over that hurdle. They needed to play that big game against Real Madrid. They are the gatekeepers of this competition. They've won it 15 times. I think this is kind of that season where it feels like PSG are finally going to get over that hump. They proved it against Liverpool. I think they'll prove it against Villa. And I think they'll prove it against Real Madrid. And I could see them going and winning it.